So, this is the first time ever recording my voice for one of my videos. I very rarely record my voice out of personal dislike towards it, and generally being kind of shy in the way of going about this, but to each their own, because I know a lot of people are able to do this pretty quickly. I wanted to do these videos for a while, this almost podcasty type thing, without a script. There was a time I wanted to go about with video essays instead, scripted and everything. But that kind of blew off. So, what I want to go over in this type of video is borderline personality disorder. It's a disorder I struggle with, and a lot of people in the world struggle with, but it's overall a pretty disvalued, misunderstood type of disorder. The way it's gone about is seen, in my opinion, very wrong. People see it as a very destructive, dangerous, untrustworthy, scary disorder, which it can be. I mean, I'm not saying everyone who has it isn't like that. But what a lot of people seem to misunderstand is that most people with this type of disorder are generally not that way. A lot of people with this disorder can be very caring, can be very kind, understanding, relatable. Once you go through all of these issues, it's like this for any mental disorder. Someone going through all these different issues, these problems, these depression, anxiety, even anger, addiction, every single one of them will have some sort of positive, and usually that's relatability, and sympathy, empathy, even. A lot of people seem to misunderstand that and go about viewing these disorders as if they're dangerous and volatile, which I want to maybe just make this video to talk about how wrongly viewed that is, because I think that misunderstanding creates a pretty big divide between people with this disorder, or even any mental disorder, and people without it. And that divide really doesn't help either side. So, to start this video off, I want to talk about my journey with first getting diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It's been roughly, I want to say, 3 years now. I didn't get diagnosed until around the beginning of this year. For reasons mainly around the fact of age and different therapists and switching around therapists. It makes it a lot more difficult to actually get that diagnosis you want to go about. But for the longest time, I always had those issues building up. I didn't know what it was at first. One of my first instincts was to go in and try and learn about what it could be, simply out of interest. I always found it interesting to learn about mental disorders and things like that, especially once I started having them myself. With my first therapist, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, as well as social anxiety disorder, which those three are fairly common diagnoses. Generalized and major depressive especially. I tend to put those disorders in the category of almost always diagnosed for a person pretty quickly, because it makes it easier to treat a patient. But whenever it comes to something like borderline personality disorder, which is generally a disorder that takes a while to fully develop, it'll show signs, sure, like any mental disorder, but it needs to take time to actually fully show its form in a way that makes it so a therapist can diagnose it. It's a very hefty, big diagnosis to get, being a personality disorder. And so, most of the time, it'll take months and months with a certain therapist before they finally decide that it's the one. And for me, that was once I got to my second therapist, my first adult therapist. My first therapist I had was my child therapist I had when I was 16, towards the end of being 17. Once I turned 18, I had to move up to an adult therapist, someone who could diagnose disorders that I felt were needed to be diagnosed. Around that time, I thought I had avoidant personality disorder, which, looking back now, was definitely not the case. Well, obviously not the case. I didn't have all of the symptoms, I didn't meet the criteria for that. And it wasn't till about halfway through my current therapist that I started really thinking maybe I have borderline. I brought it up to my therapist a good few times, and she went about finally seeing all the signs about 6 months in, and she decided to put the diagnosis in after keeping it on hold, or as she put it, like showing signs of borderline personality disorder. Showing signs is a different thing in that it means you're not fully diagnosed, but you have the symptoms of it, and it's basically something on their watch list. Whenever I finally got diagnosed with the disorder, at that point I had already tried studying up as much as I could because I was certain that is what I had. And that's a difficult part of going through diagnosis, is going through these different things, being like, yeah, that fits, that fits, that fits, that fits, and juggling around these disorders. But every once in a while, well, not every once in a while, but you'll find that one that fits almost perfectly. And your therapist might agree with you. One of the main things you need to watch out for with that, though, is trying not to almost seemingly put yourself in the shoes of that disorder. What a lot of people will do is they'll go like, oh yeah, I have this, and then they'll pick it, and then they'll stick themselves to it as if that's what they have, and force themselves to that criteria and that state of being of, yeah, this is the disorder, this is the one. And that can have a pretty heavy impact on not only the choices your therapist makes, but the choices you make and the diagnosis you go for. So with having this disorder, and after getting diagnosed, I already read up on it and knew about all these different things. The criteria and the symptoms and all of those things. And I see them in my day-to-day life. Things like the mood swings and drastic irritability, the anger outbursts, and the almost irrational thinking at times. Again, as bad as it all sounds, it's really not something someone should fear, because someone with borderline personality disorder can still make a good partner, friend, loved one in any way. And a lot of those negative views have to come from mainly rumors, as with any disorder. But it's really not as bad as it's put out to be. Living with it is bad, yes, but having to deal with it, it's something that you need to get into the mindset of. Being friends with someone who has borderline personality disorder is generally going to be a very different experience. They might take things a bit more harshly. Well, not even a bit. They'll take things more harshly most of the time. At least in my experience. Now, note that I am speaking from my experience. But even despite that, it's still good to talk to them as if they were a normal person, not some sort of science experiment gone wrong. Because they aren't. They're still people. But it's also good to note that you gotta be a bit more understanding and easygoing with someone who has a disorder like this, because the way they take things is just going to be a lot stronger, a lot more difficult. They'll react more harshly to simpler things, or they'll take things to heart a lot quicker. One of the best explanations I've seen about what it's like to have borderline personality disorder is as if you're living life without a layer of skin. You take everything much more impactfully. And along with that is some pretty extreme mood swings and mood changes, whether it be anger outbursts or instant depression to the point of self-harming thoughts, or on the flip note, complete ecstatic happiness. It's almost like a roller coaster of emotions, your ups and downs just going constantly in motion all over the place. A lot of people compare borderline personality disorder to bipolar disorder, and while it does have the similarities in terms of mood swings, it's generally a different thing in that your mood swings tend to be a lot more sporadic, don't have what I guess you could call flat, longer periods, sort of similar to how bipolar disorder works, where you have your uh, almost like longer lines and time gaps of being in this more happy, manic mood versus your depressive mood. With borderline personality disorder, it's more of your constant ongoing shifts. Even the idea of a personality disorder is strange to people because it's different than a mood disorder, as something like bipolar disorder, depressive disorders. The best way I've heard it described is a personality disorder is like a continent's climate, where it's an ongoing thing, it's permanent, and it's something that instead of coming in waves is more of a constant flowing thing. Whereas mood disorders are more like a continent's weather, where it shifts and it changes and it has its ups, its downs. Where a lot of people are mistaken is by thinking that personality disorder is just the same thing as a mood disorder, or doesn't even understand the difference between them, which it's not to their fault, obviously. It's not generally a very talked about or described thing unless you look into it. But for someone with a personality disorder, it is their personality. It's who they are. And for someone with borderline personality disorder, that tends to be someone who's more emotional, very emotional, almost unstable in a way. And don't take unstable in a negative tone, because I don't mean it that way. I know that's usually the tone that's given to it, but I don't mean unstable in a bad way. It's a sense of instability, always jumping between these moods. But it can be hard, where simple small things that normally anyone else would be able to just pick up and let go. For me, it's almost more of a pick it up, hold on to it really, really tight, and then once I finally let go, I almost feel guilty for letting it go. Like I should have held on to it more, because I never knew what it could turn into or what it could be, whether that be in a good way or a bad way. It's obviously one of the most well-known things for borderline personality disorder is what's it like to be in a relationship. Because when a lot of people hear about borderline personality disorder or just know the rumors and stuff around it, it's usually attributed to relationships because it's a big part of having the disorder. With borderline personality disorder, relationships are a very tricky, all over the place, complicated thing, in that it's almost like the relationship itself depends on your moods and the other person extensively. You will go into this relationship trusting the person as if you've known them your whole life and they're your closest, most trusted, believable person you've ever met. But then they do one wrong thing, whether it be hit a trigger or just simply upset you, and instantly you'll hate them. And you'll go into these bouts of ups and downs with this person, demonizing them, and then all of a sudden loving them, just all over the place. And that's the part that scares people when it comes to understanding borderline personality disorder. they're afraid of getting in with this person and being hurt by them, being hurt by someone with borderline personality disorder, or even hurting them. And a lot of people want to know how to be friends with someone who has borderline personality disorder. And in that regard, a lot of it comes down to understanding what it is they're going through. One of the best feelings for me when I get into this new relationship with some person is knowing that they're trying their hardest to understand what it is I'm going through. There's a lot of trust involved in each relationship. A lot of distrust can happen based on how that trust that was already there is used. And I think, personally, one of the best ways of people using it, someone I'm in a relationship with, friend, partner, whatever, is whenever they show me that they are trying. I like to know that the person I'm talking to, or just am with, is going out of their way to try and learn about something they don't even have. Simply for me. As selfish as it sounds, because in my mind that is a selfish thing to say, which I wouldn't be surprised if someone else thinks the same. Note that the person with borderline personality disorder, the better mood they're in, the more they're going to try to be the best partner they can as well. They want the relationship to work. Whenever you have borderline personality disorder, you're juggling between this loneliness or the fear of a relationship falling apart. And that fear is what makes it so that whenever a relationship is going well, someone with borderline personality disorder is going to try their hardest to make sure it stays going well. Because if it falls apart, then that's the biggest fear you can have. Because then you're afraid that the other person's going to leave, that they're not going to stay, that it's your fault that you've caused them to run away. And so knowing that they try sort of subsides that fear in a way to make it easier for them to want to try and make the relationship work better. Someone with borderline personality disorder can be a good friend. They can be a great relationship. They can be someone who's extremely caring, someone who shows amazing sympathy and empathy for any problems you're going through. It's just a matter of if you can balance it out so you do the same. If they feel that you're not contributing, which, granted, their idea of contributing can be very different. For me, like I was talking about, contribution is usually if the other person's taking their time to learn about my issues too. Then, whenever you get that feeling of contributing, it can really bring the relationship closer and make the person with borderline personality disorder want to try harder. But once they feel, if they feel, that there's no contribution, that's whenever the more drastic parts of borderline happen. These are the parts that people have also heard about, maybe to some extremes. Note that it is different for everyone. I can't speak on behalf of every single person, because there's a lot of people in this world with this disorder. I just happen to be one of them. But it doesn't mean I think the same as all of them. But the extremes can be, the manipulation aspect is what a lot of people come to. And it's a very weird way of working that whenever a relationship goes wrong, you get this sense that the other person is going to leave, and that's the thing you fear most, is relationship falling apart and dealing with the guilt of, I messed up another one. And that fear of, what if they leave and never come back? What if I can't trust them anymore? What if they're hiding things behind their back? It's a paranoia. To battle that paranoia, someone with borderline tends to mix up their wording in a way to try and almost get a reaction, to know that the other person cares. I've done things such as not talking to someone for months to know if they'll message me back or talk to me again, to let me know that they do care. And it's not until that happens that I really want to start the relationship again, because once that finally does happen, I tell myself that maybe they do care. And if they do care, then instantly the relationship's back up to the full 100 again. Where I'm fully open with them and trusting of them. And it's difficult to remember those times whenever things get bad again. Because it juggles back and forth. It's almost like a complete switch of mind, where you idolize this person, then demonize them back and forth, based on how they do things. If they spend the entire relationship trying and knowing your triggers and making sure that they watch out for them or at least acknowledge whenever they hit one, then it can go a long way. And I felt like all of this would have been good to cover, because I know a lot of people fear getting into those relationships with someone who has this disorder, and I can't blame them. It's a very different relationship you have to be in. They're different people, different ways of thinking, acting. But they're still people. They go about life in their own way. And it's a very difficult way. It's a very disjointed, unstable way. But it's their own way. And it's just good to remember that they can still be someone very memorable, very thoughtful, sympathetic, empathetic towards you, towards your thoughts, someone you can go to and be honest with. Because when you experience every emotion on every day-to-day basis, you tend to be pretty relatable to people who go through the same issues. Whether it be someone dealing with depression, anxiety, grief, anything like that, you tend to understand it better. Because you feel those emotions on such a stronger level than another person might. That's about it for this. I just wanted to try doing one of these videos, almost like a podcast type thing. And as for the gameplay that's probably going to be in the background, which I'm pretty sure for this one was Noida. I'm aware I'm not good at the game. I don't play it nearly enough and all of that. But if you have questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll try and respond. About anything. I'm fully open on talking about my disorders. I've done it for a bit now with family and partner and all those things. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a comment below and have a good one. Thank you.